Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. The Millbrook Public Library had always been a sacred place. For Officer Tom Reynolds, who'd patrolled this town for 32 years, the library meant order, quiet, and safety. It was where grandmothers read newspapers in the afternoon sun, where retired teachers volunteered to help kids with homework, where widows found companionship in book clubs and the gentle rhythm of pages turning. Nothing bad ever happened at the library, until the day it did. Tom pushed through the heavy oak doors on a routine Wednesday afternoon, nodding to Mrs. Patterson at the circulation desk. She was helping someone check out a stack of mysteries, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her voice the same soft murmur it had been for 20 years. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Then Tom turned down the aisle marked History and Biography, and froze. Between two tall shelves, partially hidden by the shadow of old books, sat two small girls with red hair. The older one, maybe 9 or 10, sat with her back impossibly straight against the bookshelf, hands folded in her lap like she'd been taught perfect manners. Her green eyes were alert, watching, taking in everything with an awareness that didn't belong in a child's face. The younger one, no more than 3, was curled against her sister's side, breathing in short, shallow gasps. Even from several feet away, Tom could see how pale she was, how her small body seemed to sink into itself, like a flower wilting in slow motion. They weren't reading, they weren't playing, they weren't doing anything children normally did in libraries. They were just waiting. Tom's instincts, honed through 3 decades of police work, screamed that something was deeply wrong. He approached slowly, carefully, the way you would approach a wounded animal that might run. "Hey there," he said gently, crouching down to their level. "I'm Officer Reynolds. Are you girls okay?" The older girl looked at him with those 2 old eyes. She didn't cry, didn't ask for help. She simply stated facts in a voice that was far too calm, far too practiced. "We're waiting for our father," she said. "He said he'd come back." Tom glanced at the younger child, whose eyes were half closed, her breathing labored. "How long have you been waiting, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she was choosing her words carefully. "A while. What's your name?" "Emily. Emily Carter. And this is my sister, Lily." "Where's your mom, Emily?" Something flickered across the girl's face. Pain, quickly hidden. "Our mom is very sick. She's been in the hospital for a long time. Our dad was trying to take care of us by himself, but..." She paused, choosing her words like someone walking through a minefield. "He said he needed to go solve some things, get help, find work. He brought us here because it's safe and warm. He said he'd come back as soon as he could." Tom's heart sank. "When did he bring you here?" Emily looked down at her hands. "I'm not exactly sure. We've been sleeping here at night, behind the shelves where no one can see. We're very quiet. We don't cause trouble." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. Sleeping here, for how long? Days, weeks? He keyed his radio with a hand that wanted to shake. "Dispatch, this is Reynolds at the public library. I need an ambulance, Child Protective Services, and a supervisor. 2 minor children. Medical attention needed. Priority response." "Copy that, Reynolds. Units en route." Emily's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her careful composure. "We're not in trouble, are we? We tried to be good. We didn't touch anything we weren't supposed to." "No, honey, you're not in trouble." Tom's voice caught. "You're not in trouble at all. But your sister needs a doctor and we need to make sure you're both safe." "Lily's been sick," Emily admitted quietly. "She hasn't eaten much. She's tired all the time. I tried to help her, but I didn't know what to do." Tom looked at the little girl, Lily, whose breathing was getting more labored by the minute. How long had she been like this? How long had her sister been trying to care for her alone? Within minutes, sirens approached. The quiet sanctuary of the library shattered as paramedics rushed in, as Mrs. Patterson gasped in horror, as other patrons began to gather and whisper. "I've seen those girls," someone said. "I thought their mother was here somewhere." "They've been here before," another voice added. "I just assumed someone was watching them." Tom watched as paramedics carefully lifted Lily onto a stretcher, as Emily clutched her sister's hand and refused to let go, as the pieces of a terrible picture began forming in his mind. 2 children, living in a library, in plain sight, for weeks maybe, and nobody had asked if they were okay. Nobody had wondered why 2 small girls were always alone. Nobody had stopped to see what was hiding between the shelves. As the ambulance pulled away, Tom stood in the library parking lot, looking back at the building that had always represented safety and community, and he wondered how many people had walked past those girls, how many had seen them and looked away, how many had chosen silence over the uncomfortable act of asking questions. The investigation was about to reveal an answer that would haunt Millbrook for a very long time. Sometimes the worst tragedies don't happen in dark alleys. Sometimes they happen in the brightest, safest places, right where everyone can see. At Millbrook General Hospital, Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the pediatric examination room, reviewing the preliminary assessment of the small patient who'd arrived 30 minutes ago. Lily Carter, 3 years old, red hair, found in the public library with her older sister. The initial exam had revealed something that made Sarah's stomach turn, not because it was violent or sudden, but because it was the opposite. This was slow, prolonged, the kind of suffering that happens when nobody notices for far too long. Temperature is slightly elevated, 99.8, the nurse reported. Blood pressure low for her age. She's severely dehydrated and shows signs of an untreated respiratory infection, possibly pneumonia. Dr. Martinez examined Lily gently. The little girl whimpered softly but didn't have the energy to resist. Her small body was frail, her breathing labored. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her skin had that papery quality that came from weeks of inadequate nutrition and care. When did she last eat a proper meal? Dr. Martinez asked the nurse. The sister, Emily, said she's been eating very little for days, maybe a week. She couldn't remember exactly. Dr. Martinez made careful notes. This didn't happen overnight. Her body shows signs of prolonged stress, weeks of inadequate food, water, medical care. How did nobody see this? In the waiting room, Emily sat on a plastic chair that was too big for her, her legs swinging nervously. A social worker named Karen Mills sat beside her, speaking in a gentle voice that didn't quite hide the seriousness of the questions she needed to ask. Emily, I know you've already talked to Officer Reynolds, but I need to understand more about what's been happening. Can you tell me about your mom? Emily's hands twisted together in her lap. Mom got really sick about 4 months ago. She was coughing all the time, couldn't breathe right. Dad took her to the hospital and they said she needed to stay for treatment. Something about her lungs, they said it would take a long time. And your dad? What happened after your mom went to the hospital? He tried to take care of us. He really did. Emily's voice was earnest, defending him even now. But he lost his job at the warehouse because he kept missing work to visit Mom. Then we couldn't pay rent. We had to leave our apartment. Karen made notes carefully. Where did you go? A few different places. Dad's friend's couch for a while. Then a motel for 2 weeks. Then, Emily's voice got quieter. Then we didn't have anywhere. We slept in Dad's car for a few nights, but it was really cold and Lily kept crying. Karen's expression remained neutral, but her pen paused for just a moment. Homeless. These children had been homeless. What happened next? Dad said he needed to find work, find help, figure things out. He said the library would be safe and warm while he did that. There are bathrooms and water fountains. He said he'd come back as soon as he could. That was, Emily thought hard, maybe 3 weeks ago? I'm not exactly sure. The days kind of blurred together. 3 weeks. 2 small children living in a library for 3 weeks. Did anyone at the library ask if you needed help? Emily shook her head. Some people smiled at us. A few asked if we liked reading, but nobody asked where our parents were or if we were okay. I think maybe they thought Mom or Dad was somewhere in the building. We tried to stay quiet and not cause problems. What did you eat? There's a little cafe in the library. Sometimes people would leave food. Half a muffin, part of a sandwich. We'd wait until they left and then take what they didn't finish. And there's a drinking fountain, so we had water. Karen felt her chest tighten. These children had been surviving on scraps and fountain water, in a public building, surrounded by people. When did Lily start getting sick? Maybe a week ago? She started coughing like Mom used to. Then she got really tired and stopped wanting to eat. I tried to make her drink water, but she kept saying her throat hurt. Yesterday she could barely walk. That's when I got really scared. Why didn't you tell someone then? Emily looked down. I was afraid if I told someone they'd take us away from each other, or that Dad would get in trouble for leaving us. I thought if I could just take care of Lily until he came back, everything would be okay. The weight of that statement hung in the air. A 9-year-old girl, terrified of asking for help because she was trying to protect what was left of her family. Karen reached over and gently squeezed Emily's hand. "You did the right thing by being there today when Officer Reynolds found you. You took care of your sister the best way you knew how. But you're a child, Emily. Taking care of Lily shouldn't have been your responsibility." Tears finally welled in Emily's eyes, the first crack in the brave facade she'd been maintaining. Is she going to be okay? The doctors are taking very good care of her. She's going to need to stay here for a few days, but yes, I think she'll be okay. And Dad, are you going to arrest him? Karen chose her words carefully. We're trying to find your father. Not to arrest him, but to understand what happened and get him help too. Sometimes adults struggle and don't know how to ask for support. Back in the examination room, Dr. Martinez was administering IV fluids and antibiotics. Lily was already looking slightly better, her breathing a little easier, some color returning to her pale cheeks. But Dr. Martinez couldn't stop thinking about the question that haunted her. How many people had walked past these children every day for 3 weeks? How many had seen 2 small girls sitting quietly in the library day after day? How many had noticed and looked away? Officer Reynolds stood in the hospital corridor, making calls, coordinating the search for James Carter. But his mind kept returning to the library, to those shelves, to the small space where 2 children had been hiding in plain sight. Millbrook was about to learn a hard lesson about the difference between seeing and noticing, about the cost of minding your own business, about how easy it is for tragedy to happen right where everyone is watching. Officer Reynolds returned to the library that evening, his notebook open, his expression heavier than it had been that morning. The building was closed now, but Mrs. Patterson had stayed late, sitting at the circulation desk with her hands folded, waiting. "I need to ask you some questions," Tom said gently. Mrs. Patterson nodded, her eyes red from crying. "I've been sitting here trying to remember, trying to understand how I didn't see. Did you see those girls before today?" "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. "I saw them many times, maybe 10 times, 15, over the past few weeks. They were always so quiet, sitting in the history section or near the children's books. The older one, Emily, would read to her little sister. I thought it was sweet. Did you ever ask where their parents were?" Mrs. Patterson's hands trembled. "No. I assumed. I thought their mother must be somewhere in the building, maybe in the restroom or looking at books in another section. They were so well behaved, so clean. Well, they looked clean at first. Just thought they were being allowed some independence while a parent browsed. When did you start to wonder?" "Maybe a week ago. I noticed them here when I opened in the morning, and they were still here when I locked up at night. But I told myself maybe their parent worked nearby, dropped them off for the day. Some families do that, use the library as a safe place while they work." Tom wrote carefully. "Did anyone on staff discuss the girls?" "Janet mentioned them once. She's our children's librarian. She said she'd seen them several days in a row and wondered if they were homeschooled, if that's why they came so often. We both agreed they seemed fine, quiet, respectful, not causing any problems. Did anyone check on them, ask their names, verify an adult was responsible for them?" Mrs. Patterson put her face in her hands. "No, we have a policy about unaccompanied children, but they didn't seem unaccompanied. They seemed accompanied by each other. And I didn't want to embarrass a parent who might be teaching their children independence. I didn't want to assume the worst." Tom found Janet Morrison in the children's section, reshelving books with shaking hands. "I saw them almost every day," Janet said before he could ask. "The older girl, Emily, she'd bring her sister to story time on Tuesdays. They'd sit in the back, very quiet. Lily would fall asleep sometimes, and Emily would just hold her. I thought it was precious." "Did you speak to them?" "A few times. I asked Emily what her favorite books were. She said she liked stories about families. I recommended some titles. She thanked me very politely." Janet's voice broke. She was so polite, so careful with the books. "How did I not know? What made you think everything was okay?" "They had backpacks, clean clothes, at least at first. Emily would take Lily to the bathroom regularly. They seemed cared for. And this is a library in a safe town. I see grandparents with grandchildren, nannies with kids, older siblings babysitting all the time. I had no reason to think." She trailed off. Tom moved through the library, finding patrons who'd been regulars during the past weeks. Everyone had a similar story. Dorothy Henderson, 72, who came every afternoon to read newspapers. I saw those sweet red-headed girls several times. I smiled at them once, and the older one smiled back. So polite, I just assumed someone was watching them. Marcus Webb, a retired teacher who volunteered in the computer lab. They used the computers sometimes. Emily would help her little sister play educational games. I thought they were waiting for a parent to finish work or shopping. I never questioned it. Patricia Santos, who led the weekly book club. I saw them curled up together near the mystery section one evening. It was close to closing time, and I remember thinking it was late for such young children to still be here. But then I thought maybe their mother was in the restroom. I didn't want to pry. Every single person had the same refrain. I thought someone was watching them. Back at the circulation desk, Mrs. Patterson looked at Officer Reynolds with tears streaming down her face. We have security cameras, I already checked. You can see them on the footage, coming in when we open, staying until we close. Some nights they must have hidden when we did our closing rounds. They were here all night, Tom. Children sleeping in a library and none of us knew. It's not just your responsibility, Tom said, though the words felt hollow. Isn't it? Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp with self-recrimination. This is a library, a place of community. We're supposed to notice, we're supposed to care. Those children were here for weeks, and every single one of us chose not to ask the difficult questions. We chose comfort over curiosity. We chose to assume rather than verify. Tom closed his notebook. She was right. They all were. The library had been full of good people, kind people, educated people who valued community and safety, and every single one of them had walked past two children who desperately needed help. Because asking would have been uncomfortable. Because assuming everything was fine was easier than discovering it wasn't. Because in a world where everyone minds their own business, children can disappear while standing in plain sight. Tom thought about Emily's words. We tried to stay quiet and not cause problems. Two small girls had made themselves invisible because they'd learned that asking for help meant being a burden, and a whole community had let them stay invisible because seeing them, really seeing them, would have required action. As Tom left the library, the autumn sun was setting over Millbrook. Streetlights flickered on. Families walked home from dinner. Everything looked normal, but nothing would ever be quite the same, because everyone was about to learn that the question wasn't just who had failed Emily and Lily. It was, how many other invisible children were they still not seeing? The interview room at the Department of Child and Family Services was designed to be non-threatening. Soft chairs, pastel walls, a basket of toys in the corner, and a box of tissues on the table that nobody had touched yet. Emily sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap, the same careful posture she'd held in the library. Karen Mills sat across from her, a gentle expression on her face that didn't quite mask the weight of the questions she needed to ask. Emily, I know you've already talked to Officer Reynolds and the doctors, but I need to understand the whole picture so we can figure out what happens next. Can you start from the beginning? When did things start to change for your family? Emily thought for a moment, choosing her words with the same careful precision she applied to everything. It started when Mom got sick. She'd been coughing for a long time, maybe 2 months before Dad finally took her to the hospital. She kept saying she was fine, that it was just a cold, but it kept getting worse. Why didn't she go to the doctor sooner? We didn't have insurance anymore. Dad's job at the warehouse didn't offer it, and Mom said urgent care was too expensive. She tried home remedies, tea, honey, rest, but nothing worked. Karen made notes. What happened when she finally went to the hospital? They said her lungs were really sick. I don't remember all the medical words, but they said she needed to stay there for treatment, that it would take months, maybe longer. Dad was really scared. I could tell, even though he tried to hide it. How did your dad handle taking care of you and Lily after that? Emily's hands twisted together slightly, the first crack in her composure. He tried really hard. At first he'd wake us up for school, make us breakfast, keep everything normal. But he was visiting Mom every day at the hospital, and his boss got mad about him missing work. Then one day Dad came home and said he'd been let go. How did he seem when that happened? Quiet. Really quiet. He didn't yell or break things or anything like that. He just went silent, like part of him turned off. He'd sit at the kitchen table staring at bills, and I'd ask him questions, and he wouldn't hear me at first. I'd have to say his name 3 or 4 times. Karen's pen paused. Did that frighten you? A little, but mostly I just felt sad for him. I knew he was trying to figure out how to fix everything, and he didn't know how. What happened after he lost his job? We couldn't pay rent. The landlord was nice at first. He gave us an extra month, but then he said we had to leave. Dad's friend Mike let us stay on his couch for a while, maybe 2 weeks. But Mike's apartment was small, and I think his girlfriend didn't like having us there, so we left. Where did you go? Dad found a motel that charged by the week. It was kind of scary, loud at night, and the room smelled funny, but it had beds and a bathroom. We stayed there until Dad ran out of money. That was about 3 weeks ago. Then what happened? Emily's voice got quieter. We slept in Dad's car for a few nights. It was really cold at night, even with blankets. Lily cried a lot because she was uncomfortable. Dad would drive around with the heater on to keep us warm, but he said we couldn't do that too much or we'd run out of gas and he needed gas to look for work. Karen felt her chest tighten. That must have been very scary. I was mostly worried about Lily. She's only 3. She didn't understand why we couldn't go home or why Mom wasn't there. I tried to tell her stories to help her fall asleep, but it was hard because I was cold too. What did your dad decide to do? One morning he drove us to the library. He said it was safe and warm, that there were bathrooms and water. He said he needed to focus on finding work and getting help, and he couldn't do that if he was worrying about keeping us warm in the car. He said the library was better. He gave me $20 and said to make it last. He said he'd come back as soon as he could. Did he say when that would be? He said maybe a few days, maybe a week. He wasn't sure. He cried when he left. I'd never seen Dad cry before. Karen's voice was very gentle. And he didn't come back. No, I waited every day. I thought maybe he found a job and was working long hours. Or maybe he was checking on Mom at the hospital. I kept thinking he'd walk through those library doors any minute. But he didn't. What did you do with the $20? I bought food at the little cafe in the library, 2 muffins and 2 juice boxes at a time. I tried to make it last. But $20 doesn't go very far when you're feeding 2 people for weeks. After the money ran out, we found ways. People would leave food. There was the water fountain. We managed. When did Lily start getting sick? About a week ago. She started coughing like Mom used to. At first I thought maybe it was just a cold, but then she got really tired and stopped wanting to eat. I tried to make her drink water, but she said her throat hurt. Yesterday she could barely walk to the bathroom. That's when I got really scared. Why didn't you tell someone at the library? Emily looked down at her hands. I was afraid. I thought if I told someone, they'd call the police and we'd get in trouble, or they'd separate me and Lily, or they'd find Dad and he'd get arrested. I kept thinking if I could just take care of her a little longer, Dad would come back and everything would be okay. But today you let Officer Reynolds help. Lily was so sick. I didn't know what else to do. And Officer Reynolds, he had kind eyes. He looked like he actually wanted to help, not punish us. So I told him the truth. Karen reached across the table and gently touched Emily's hand. You did the right thing. You've been so brave, Emily. But you're 9 years old. Taking care of yourself and your sister in a library for 3 weeks. That should never have been your responsibility. For the first time since the interview began, Emily's eyes filled with tears. Is Lily going to be okay? Yes. The doctors say she's responding well to treatment. She'll need to stay in the hospital for a few more days, but she's going to recover. And Dad, are you going to arrest him when you find him? Karen chose her words very carefully. We're trying to find your father because we think he needs help. Sometimes adults make choices they shouldn't make, but not because they're bad people. Sometimes they're just overwhelmed and don't know where to turn. We want to understand what happened and help your family. What's going to happen to me and Lily? For now, you'll stay in a safe place with people who will take care of you. We'll make sure you can visit Lily in the hospital, and we'll figure out the next steps together. But Emily, I need you to understand something important. None of this is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. The tears finally spilled over. I tried so hard to take care of her. I know you did, Karen said softly. And because of you, she's getting the help she needs now. You saved your sister, Emily. You were brave enough to ask for help when it mattered most. Outside the interview room, Officer Reynolds stood with Karen's supervisor, reviewing the case notes. The father, James Carter, hasn't been seen in 3 weeks, the supervisor said. No activity on his bank cards, no calls from his phone. It's like he vanished. Or something happened to him, Tom said quietly. Either way, we need to find him. Not just for the investigation, but because those girls need answers. They need to know whether he abandoned them or whether something prevented him from coming back. Tom thought about Emily's words. He cried when he left. A father who cried saying goodbye wasn't a man abandoning his children without care. He was a man in crisis making an impossible choice. The question was, where was he now? And would they find him in time to put this broken family back together? Dr. Sarah Martinez sat in her office at Millbrook General, reviewing the complete medical workup on Lily Carter. The results painted a picture that was both heartbreaking and, unfortunately, all too familiar. She picked up the phone and called Karen Mills. "I have Lily's full assessment," Dr. Martinez said. "You should hear this directly from me before it goes into the official report." Karen put her on speaker so Officer Reynolds, who was in her office, could hear as well. "Go ahead, doctor." Lily has pneumonia, bacterial, likely started as a simple respiratory infection that went untreated for at least 2 weeks. Her lungs show inflammation consistent with prolonged illness. She's also severely dehydrated and malnourished. Not starvation level, but her body shows clear signs of inadequate nutrition over an extended period. How extended? I'd estimate 6 to 8 weeks of insufficient food intake. Her weight is in the 5th percentile for her age. Her muscle tone is poor. She has vitamin deficiencies that suggest she's been living on very limited, non-nutritious food, probably carbohydrates with little protein or fresh vegetables. Karen thought about Emily's description of stretching $20, of eating scraps left at the cafe. What about Emily? We examined her too, with her permission. She's in better shape than Lily, but still concerning. She's underweight, showing signs of chronic stress, mild anemia. Her body is in survival mode. She's been running on adrenaline and fear for weeks. The fact that she's managed to keep herself and her sister alive is remarkable, but it's taken a toll. And will they recover fully? Physically, yes, with proper care. Lily will need to finish her course of antibiotics, continue IV nutrition for a few more days, then transition to regular meals with supplements. Emily needs rest, consistent nutrition, and honestly, someone to tell her she doesn't have to be the adult anymore. Dr. Martinez paused. But Karen, here's what concerns me most. This wasn't sudden trauma. This was slow deterioration. These children have been in crisis for months, and the medical system had multiple opportunities to intervene. What do you mean? I accessed their medical records. The mother, Claire Carter, was hospitalized 4 months ago with advanced pneumonia and lung complications. She's still here, actually, in the long-term care wing. During her intake, the hospital's social services should have done a family assessment. They should have asked, who's caring for the minor children? Does the family have support? Are there financial concerns? Did anyone ask those questions? According to the records, a social worker spoke briefly with the father. He said he had family support and could manage. Nobody followed up, nobody verified. The mother was the priority patient, and once they confirmed someone was watching the kids, they moved on. Karen felt anger rising. So the system saw this family in crisis and did nothing. The system saw a sick woman and assumed the rest would sort itself out. It's not malicious. It's just how overwhelmed institutions operate. Everyone focuses on their specific responsibility and assumes someone else is handling the rest. Officer Reynolds spoke up. What about the children's medical records? When was the last time they saw a doctor? Dr. Martinez pulled up the files. Emily's last checkup was 14 months ago. Lily's was at her 2-year wellness visit, over a year ago. Both are behind on vaccinations. Neither has been to a dentist in over a year. Again, not because of neglect in the traditional sense, but because of barriers. No insurance, no money. A parent overwhelmed and isolated. Is the mother well enough to be interviewed? Karen asked. I'll check with her medical team, but probably. She's stable, just requires ongoing respiratory support. I should warn you, though, she likely has no idea what's happened to her children. She's been too sick to have many visitors, and I doubt anyone's told her that her husband stopped coming or that her daughters were living in a library. The thought of that conversation hung heavy in the air. There's one more thing, Dr. Martinez added. When I examined Emily, she had bruises on her knees and elbows, typical of a child sleeping on hard floors. She also has what looks like a mild skin infection on her hands from inadequate hygiene facilities. These are children who've been sleeping rough, Karen, in a library, in a safe public building where people walk past them every day. After the call ended, Karen and Tom sat in heavy silence. "We need to find the father," Tom said finally, "but I'm starting to think he's not our villain here." "No," Karen agreed. "He's a victim too. A man who lost his wife's health, then his job, then his home, then his ability to cope. And when he finally broke, he made a terrible choice. But he made it thinking the library was safer than keeping them with him. The real failure is systemic," Tom said. "A hospital that didn't follow up on a family in crisis. A job that fired a man dealing with a family emergency. A society that offers no safety net for people falling through the cracks. A community full of good people who all assumed someone else was paying attention." Karen pulled up her computer and began typing. "I'm recommending immediate foster placement in a home where the sisters can stay together, supervised visitation with the mother as soon as she's well enough, and a full family services intervention to address the root causes, not just to punish the father, but to rebuild what's broken." "You think the father wants to be found?" Tom asked. "I think he's either hiding because he's ashamed, or something's happened to him that's prevented him from coming back. Either way, those girls deserve answers. They deserve to know whether their father abandoned them or whether he's lost somewhere too." Tom stood to leave, then paused. "You know what haunts me? Emily said he cried when he left them. A man who cries saying goodbye isn't a man who doesn't care. He's a man who's out of options. Then we find him," Karen said. "And we figure out how to help this family instead of just punishing them for surviving the only way they knew how." Back in her hospital room, Lily was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, her breathing steady, color returning to her cheeks. The IV dripped nutrients into her small body, slowly restoring what had been depleted. In the foster home where Emily had been placed temporarily, she lay in a real bed with clean sheets, staring at the ceiling. The social worker had assured her that Lily was safe, that she could visit tomorrow, that everything would be okay. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about her father's face the day he'd driven them to the library, the way his hands had shaken on the steering wheel, the way he'd hugged them both so tightly before walking away, the way he'd whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I promise." She wondered if he'd kept that promise, or if he'd gotten lost trying. Officer Reynolds pulled up to the Pine Street shelter just as the dinner service was ending. The building, a converted church basement, smelled of industrial detergent and cafeteria food. Men filed out slowly, some heading to assigned bunks, others back onto the streets for another night. Tom showed James Carter's photo to the volunteer at the check-in desk. "Have you seen this man?" The volunteer, an older woman named Diane, studied the picture carefully. "Yeah, he's been here. Comes in most nights for dinner, sometimes stays over if we have space, quiet guy. Keeps to himself mostly." Tom's pulse quickened. "Is he here now? Let me check the sign-in sheet." Diane ran her finger down the page. "James Carter. Yes, he checked in about 2 hours ago. Bed 12 in the back section." Tom followed her directions through narrow hallways lined with metal bunk beds. Most were occupied by men in various states of exhaustion, some sleeping, some staring at phones with cracked screens, some just lying still, staring at nothing. James Carter was at the far end, sitting on the edge of a lower bunk, his head in his hands. He'd lost weight since the photo was taken. His clothes hung loose on his frame. His hair was longer, unwashed, but it was definitely him. "Mr. Carter? James Carter?" The man looked up slowly, and Tom saw something that made his chest ache. Not defiance or anger, but absolute defeat. James's eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles. His hands trembled as he lowered them from his face. "I know why you're here," James said quietly. "I've been waiting for someone to come." Tom sat carefully on the adjacent bunk, keeping his posture non-threatening. "Your daughters are safe. Emily and Lily are both okay." Something broke in James's expression, relief mixed with anguish. "They found help? Someone helped them?" "Emily got Lily to the hospital. She's being treated for pneumonia and dehydration, but the doctors say she'll recover fully." James put his face in his hands again, shoulders shaking. "I didn't want to leave them there. I didn't want to. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep them warm in the car, couldn't feed them, couldn't do anything right. I thought the library would be safer. I thought it would just be a few days." "What happened, James? Why didn't you go back?" James looked up, tears streaming down his face. I tried. God, I tried. That first day I walked 12 miles applying for jobs. Nothing. Second day, same thing. I went to 3 temp agencies, 4 restaurants, 2 warehouses. Nobody was hiring, or they wanted references I didn't have, or they did background checks and saw I'd been evicted and fired. He pulled at his hair. I went to the hospital to see Claire, my wife. Tried to explain what was happening, but she was having a bad day, couldn't breathe, was panicking. I couldn't burden her with this. I couldn't tell her I'd failed so completely that our children were sleeping in a library. Why didn't you go back to them? I was going to. Every day I told myself, tomorrow I'll get a job, tomorrow I'll have good news, tomorrow I'll be able to tell them I fixed it. But tomorrow never came. And then, he paused, struggling. Then I started thinking maybe they were better off without me. Maybe someone at the library would notice them and get them real help. Help I couldn't provide. Tom kept his voice level. So you stayed away intentionally. The first week I was trying to fix things. The second week I was falling apart. By the third week I couldn't face them. Couldn't face going back with nothing. Couldn't face seeing Emily's eyes and telling her I'd failed again. So I just stayed away like a coward. Did you know Lily was sick? James shook his head violently. No, if I'd known she was sick, I would have gone back. I would have taken her to the hospital myself. I thought the library would keep them safe and warm while I sorted things out. I thought it would only be a few days. Those few days turned into 3 weeks. I know. James's voice was barely audible. I know. Every day I told myself to go back, and every day I couldn't move. It was like my body stopped working. I'd wake up and think about walking to the library, and I just couldn't. Couldn't face what I'd done. Couldn't face being that much of a failure. Tom studied the man in front of him. This wasn't a monster. This was someone broken by circumstances, paralyzed by shame, drowning in a situation he couldn't navigate. Your daughters need you, James. Not a perfect version of you. Just you. Emily's been asking about you. She's worried you got hurt or lost or that you didn't care enough to come back. She needs to know which one it is. I care, James said desperately. I care more than anything. I just didn't know how to show it. How do you show you care when you can't provide anything? When you can't keep your children fed or housed or safe? You show up, Tom said simply. Even with nothing, even having failed, you show up and you tell the truth. James looked toward the shelter exit, then back at Tom. Are you arresting me? That depends. Are you going to come with me voluntarily to talk to child services, to see your daughters, to face what happened and work toward fixing it? For a long moment, James didn't respond. Tom could see the war happening inside him. Shame versus love, fear versus responsibility. Finally, James stood on shaky legs. I'll come. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll come. I need to see them. I need them to know I didn't stop loving them. As they walked out of the shelter, James paused. Officer, is Emily angry with me? Tom thought about the little girl sitting in that interview room, carefully choosing her words, trying to protect her father even while explaining what had happened. No, Tom said honestly. She's worried about you. She's been waiting for you to come back. She never stopped believing you would. James made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She shouldn't believe in me. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, Tom said. But she does anyway. That's what children do. They love us even when we fail them. The question is, what are you going to do with that second chance? They drove through Millbrook in silence, past the library where 2 girls had waited, past the hospital where one was recovering, toward a conversation that would determine whether this broken family could begin to heal. James stared out the window, watching his town roll by. Familiar streets that had become foreign territory when he'd lost everything. I used to have a good life here, he said quietly. A job, a home, a wife, 2 daughters. How does someone lose all of that in 4 months? Bad luck, Tom said. A broken system. A society that doesn't catch people when they fall. Take your pick. But James, you didn't lose your daughters. Not yet. They're still here, still waiting. You can still choose to fight for them. I don't know how to fight anymore. Then let other people fight with you, Tom said. That's what you should have done from the beginning. Asked for help before it got this bad. I didn't know how to ask. Then learn, Tom said firmly. Because those girls need a father who knows how to say, I need help. Can you do that? James wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I can try. That's all anyone's asking, Tom said. Just try. Karen Mills stood outside room 347 in the long-term care wing of Millbrook General, reviewing Claire Carter's medical chart one more time before entering. The conversation she was about to have would be one of the hardest of her career. She knocked softly and entered. Claire Carter lay propped up on pillows, an oxygen tube beneath her nose, monitors beeping steadily beside her bed. She was thin, frighteningly so, with dark circles under her eyes and pale skin that spoke of months spent indoors, fighting for each breath. But when she turned toward the door, her eyes were alert and immediately worried. "Is it James?" she asked before Karen could introduce herself. "Did something happen to my husband?" Karen sat in the chair beside the bed. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Karen Mills. I'm with Child and Family Services. Your husband is safe, but I need to talk to you about Emily and Lily." Claire's hand went to her chest, her breathing suddenly more labored. "The girls? Are they hurt? Where are they?" "They're safe," Karen said quickly. "Both of them are safe, but there have been some difficulties, and I need to explain what's been happening while you've been hospitalized." Over the next 20 minutes, Karen laid out the story as gently as she could. James losing his job, the eviction, the string of temporary housing, the 3 weeks the girls spent in the library, Lily's pneumonia, Emily's remarkable resilience. Claire listened with tears streaming silently down her face, her hands gripping the bedsheet so tightly her knuckles turned white. "No," she whispered when Karen finished. "No, that can't be right. James would never. He would have told me. He visits. He would have said something. When was the last time your husband visited, Mrs. Carter?" Claire's brow furrowed. I don't know exactly. The days blur together here. Maybe a week ago? 2 weeks?" She looked panicked. "I lose track of time. Sometimes I'm so heavily medicated I don't remember if someone visited or if I dreamed it." Karen pulled out her tablet and showed Claire the hospital's visitor logs. "According to these records, your husband's last visit was 3 weeks ago, the same day he brought Emily and Lily to the library." Claire stared at the screen, then at Karen, then back at the screen. "That can't be right. He wouldn't just stop coming unless—" Her breathing became more rapid. "Unless something happened to him. Is he hurt? Is he in trouble? He's at the station now talking to officers. He's physically unharmed, but Mrs. Carter, he's been struggling. Severely. He's been living in a homeless shelter, unable to find work, unable to cope with losing your income, your home, and your health all at once." "I did this," Claire said, her voice breaking. "I got sick and I destroyed my family." "You didn't choose to get sick," Karen said firmly. "Getting ill isn't a moral failure, but I need to understand something. How much did you manage before you were hospitalized?" Claire wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. "Everything. I managed everything. James is a good man, a good father, but he's not organized. He doesn't think about schedules or appointments or bills. I handled all of that. The school calendars, the doctor visits, the grocery lists, the budget. James worked and loved the girls, but I was the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. Did he know how to do those things? Some of it, but not all. I kept telling myself I'd teach him, show him my systems, but there was always tomorrow, always next week. I thought I had time." She pressed her hand to her chest, struggling to breathe and speak simultaneously. "I never thought I'd end up in here for months. I thought I'd be home in a few weeks." Karen made careful notes. "When you were admitted, did anyone ask about your family situation? About who would care for the children and manage the household? A social worker came by, asked if James could handle things. I said yes because I believed he could. He's their father. Of course he could take care of them. I didn't realize—" She paused, gasping slightly. "I didn't realize how much I'd been holding together that he didn't even see. That's called invisible labor," Karen said gently. "And when the person doing it suddenly can't, everything they were holding falls at once. Your husband didn't understand the full extent of what you managed because you made it look effortless." "I failed them," Claire whispered. "I got sick and I failed my family." "No, the system failed your family. You got sick and instead of support, your husband faced job loss and eviction. Instead of resources, he found barriers. Instead of community catching him when he fell through every crack until he was sleeping in a shelter, and your daughters were sleeping in a library." Claire's tears came harder now. "Can I see them? Please. I need to see Emily and Lily. I need to tell them I'm sorry." Lily is still in the pediatric ward here in the hospital. She's recovering well, but she'll need to stay a few more days. Emily is in temporary foster care. We can arrange supervised visits for both of them, but Mrs. Carter, you need to understand. Seeing you might be difficult for them. They've been through trauma. They may be angry or confused. I don't care if they're angry. They should be angry. I need them to know I love them, that I didn't know, that if I'd known, I would have. She couldn't finish, her breathing too labored, her emotions too overwhelming. A nurse rushed in, checking monitors. Mrs. Carter, you need to calm down. Your oxygen levels are dropping. Karen stood. I'll arrange the visits, but right now you need to focus on getting better. Your daughters need you healthy, not bedridden by guilt and stress. Tell them, Claire gasped between breaths. Tell them I love them. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm fighting to get better so I can come home. I will, Karen promised. Outside the room, Karen leaned against the wall, emotionally exhausted. This family hadn't been destroyed by cruelty or malice. They'd been destroyed by circumstance, by invisible labor becoming suddenly visible when it vanished, by a society that offered no safety net for people in free fall. She pulled out her phone and called Officer Reynolds. How's the father? She asked. Broken but willing. He wants to see the girls, wants to explain. How's the mother? Devastated. She's been lying in that hospital bed for 4 months, sick and isolated, with no idea her family was falling apart. Tom, this whole family needs help, not punishment. Can we make that happen? I'm going to try, Tom said. But Karen, the community is angry. People are demanding answers about how this happened in plain sight. They want someone to blame. Then we give them the truth, Karen said. We tell them that this family fell through every crack our society has, that the mother managed everything until she couldn't, that the father tried until he broke, that 2 little girls survived because nobody taught them they were allowed to ask for help. And we make sure everyone understands that blame won't fix this, only support will. Think people will listen? They'd better, Karen said, because if they don't learn from this, there will be more families falling, more children hiding in plain sight, more people drowning while everyone assumes someone else is watching. She hung up and headed toward the pediatric ward. It was time to tell Lily that her mother loved her, that her father was found, and that even though everything was broken right now, people were finally trying to put the pieces back together. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was a beginning. Officer Reynolds sat in the library's security office, watching 3 weeks of footage on fast forward. The timestamps told a story that made his chest tighten with each passing hour. Day 1, 9:47 a.m. 2 small red-headed girls enter through the main doors. The older one holds the younger one's hand. They head straight to the children's section, sitting down with books. Normal. Unremarkable. Day 1, 8:52 p.m. Closing time. Staff do their rounds. The girls are nowhere visible on camera. Tom knew now they were hiding, probably in the restroom stalls or behind the tall shelves in the reference section where shadows pooled thick. Day 2, 9:15 a.m. The girls emerge from somewhere off camera when the library opens. They're wearing the same clothes as yesterday. Nobody notices. Day 4, 2:30 p.m. Emily leads Lily to the small cafe. They purchase a muffin and split it. Emily counts coins carefully onto the counter. The cafe worker smiles and hands them napkins. Doesn't ask questions. Day 7, 11:03 a.m. A woman, Mrs. Patterson, based on the timestamp notes, walks past the girls 3 times while shelving books. She smiles at them once. They smile back. She keeps walking. Day 9, 4:15 p.m. Emily takes Lily to the bathroom. They're in there for 23 minutes. Tom realized they were probably washing up as best they could with paper towels and hand soap. Day 11, 6:45 p.m. A man leaves half a sandwich on a table in the reading area, walks away to browse magazines. Emily watches him carefully. When he's out of sight, she quickly takes the sandwich, wraps it in napkins, shares it with Lily. Nobody sees. Day 14. The footage shows the girls looking noticeably thinner. Their clothes are wrinkled, their hair less neat. Emily's careful posture is still there, but Lily moves more slowly, stays seated more often. Day 17, 10:30 a.m. Story time in the children's section. Emily and Lily sit in the back row. Lily leans against her sister, eyes half closed. The librarian, Janet Morrison, reads enthusiastically. She glances at the girls twice but doesn't approach them. Day 19. Lily is clearly unwell. She barely moves from their usual spot near the history shelves. Emily brings her water from the fountain in a paper cup, holds it while she drinks. A patron walks past, glances at them, keeps going. Day 21, 8:47 p.m. Closing time. Staff sweep through for final checks. The camera shows Emily pulling Lily behind a tall shelf unit just before a librarian rounds the corner. They've learned the patterns. They know how to disappear. Day 22. The day Officer Reynolds found them. Tom paused the footage and rubbed his face. 22 days. These children had been living in this building for 22 days, and the security cameras had captured them on footage that nobody had thought to review, because nobody had thought to look. He compiled key screenshots and printed them. Evidence not of crime, but of collective blindness. Then he pulled the visitor logs and cross-referenced them with the timestamps. How many people had been in the library during those 3 weeks? The numbers were staggering. 523 unique visitors checked out books. 87 children attended story times and programs. 34 volunteers worked regular shifts. 12 staff members opened and closed the building daily. More than 650 people had been in and out of that library while 2 children lived there, and not one person had asked the right questions. Tom created a timeline, marking every moment someone had come close. Day 3. Mrs. Patterson shelved books 2 feet from where the girls slept behind the reference desk. Didn't look down. Day 5. A volunteer noticed Emily reading to Lily and commented to another staff member, "Those girls love reading." Nothing more. Day 8. The cafe worker mentioned to her manager that, "Those red-headed sisters come in a lot." Manager shrugged. "Maybe they're homeschooled." Day 12. A patron reported to the desk that she'd seen a child sleeping in the history section. Staff member went to check. Emily had woken Lily by then. They were reading quietly. "Everything's fine," the staff member reported. Day 16. Janet Morrison, the children's librarian, made a note in her daily log. "Carter girls here again. Very well behaved. Should ask about their reading preferences." Never followed up. Day 20. A janitor found a small pile of napkins and food wrappers behind a shelf. Threw them away. Didn't report it. Every single entry was a missed opportunity. Every single moment was a chance for someone to ask, "Are you okay? Where are your parents? Do you need help?" Tom printed everything and headed to Karen's office. She needed to see this before the community meeting scheduled for tomorrow. When he spread the documents across her desk, Karen's expression shifted from professional concern to something harder to define, anger mixed with sorrow. 650 people, she said quietly, give or take. 650 opportunities to save these children before Lily got pneumonia, before Emily ran out of money, before they spent 3 weeks sleeping on floors and eating scraps. Everyone was busy, Tom said. Everyone had their own concerns. Everyone assumed someone else was watching. Karen picked up one of the screenshots. Emily, small and tired, holding Lily's hand as they walked past a dozen adults browsing the new releases section. None of the adults were looking at the children. "This is what's going to haunt me," Karen said. "Not that bad people did bad things, but that good people did nothing. That a whole community looked and didn't see. That we've built a society where children can be invisible while standing in the brightest public spaces." "What do we do with this?" Tom asked. "We show it at the meeting," Karen said. "We make people uncomfortable. We force them to see what they missed. Not to shame them, but to wake them up. Because Emily and Lily are safe now, but how many other invisible children are out there?" Tom thought about Emily's careful words. "We tried to stay quiet and not cause problems." 2 little girls had learned that being invisible was safer than being seen, that asking for help meant being a burden, that surviving alone was better than risking rejection. They'd learned those lessons from somewhere. They'd learned them from a world that praises self-sufficiency and punishes need, from a community that values privacy over connection, from hundreds of people who walked past suffering because stopping to ask questions would have been uncomfortable. "Tomorrow's meeting is going to be difficult," Tom said. "Good," Karen replied. "It should be. This whole town is about to look in a mirror and see something ugly, not because they're bad people, but because they've been asleep. And sometimes the only way to wake someone up is to show them exactly what they missed while they were sleeping." She gathered the documents into a folder. Let's make sure they never sleep through this again. Margaret Patterson had worked at the Millbrook Public Library for 32 years. She'd helped thousands of children find their first chapter book, watched teenagers discover poetry that changed their lives, and created a space where everyone, regardless of age or circumstance, felt welcome. But tonight, sitting across from Karen Mills in the empty reading room, she felt like a failure. "I saw them," Margaret said quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Not once, many times." Karen waited, her pen poised but her expression gentle. "The first time was maybe 4 weeks ago," Margaret continued. "Two little girls with red hair. The older one, Emily, came to the desk and asked very politely if they could stay and read. I remember thinking how well-mannered she was, how mature." She paused, her voice catching. "I should have wondered why a child that young needed to be so careful." Margaret described the pattern she'd noticed. The girls arriving early, always together, Emily choosing books while Lily sat quietly nearby. They stayed all day, every day. Emily would bring Lily to the children's section, read to her in soft voices, help her to the bathroom. "I saw Lily getting paler," Margaret admitted. "I saw her energy fading, but I told myself children get sick sometimes. I told myself their mother was probably nearby, maybe working at one of the shops down the street." "Did you ever see an adult with them?" Karen asked. Margaret shook her head, shame coloring her cheeks. "No, and that's what haunts me. I noticed they were always alone. I noticed Emily watching the door like she was waiting for someone. I noticed how they'd linger near the cafe, how Emily would wait until people left food behind." Her voice broke. "I saw a child feeding her little sister leftover muffins, and I told myself it was none of my business." Karen leaned forward. "Why didn't you ask if they needed help?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words came slowly, painfully honest. "Because I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of offending someone, afraid of assuming the worst about a family I didn't know." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I work in a library. I see all kinds of families, all kinds of situations. I've been trained not to judge, not to make assumptions, but somewhere along the way, I confused respect for privacy with looking the other way. I kept telling myself, someone else knows, someone else is watching. Their father will come. Their mother will appear. It's not my place to interfere." She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "And then one day, I looked up and saw Officer Reynolds kneeling next to them in the history aisle, and I knew something terrible had happened, and I knew I'd let it happen by staying silent." Karen set down her pen. "Margaret, you're not alone in this. Dozens of people saw those girls." "But I'm a librarian," Margaret said, her voice fierce with self-recrimination. "Libraries are supposed to be safe spaces. I'm supposed to notice when children need help. That's my job, and I failed." "What would you do differently?" Karen asked gently. Margaret didn't hesitate. "I would ask, even if it felt awkward, even if I risked being wrong. I would walk up to that little girl and say, 'Hi, I'm Margaret. I've seen you here a lot. Are you okay? Do you need anything?'" She looked directly at Karen. "Because I've learned something these past few days. Being polite, being respectful, being careful not to intrude. Those are good things. But they can't come at the cost of a child's safety. My fear of being rude shouldn't have been louder than my instinct that something was wrong." Karen nodded slowly. "That's an important distinction. I've worked here for 3 decades, Margaret said softly. "I've always believed libraries are sanctuaries. But Emily and Lily taught me something. A sanctuary isn't just a place where nothing bad happens. It's a place where people notice when something's wrong and do something about it." She stood, straightening her cardigan with shaking hands. "I can't undo the last month, but I can make sure it never happens again. Not on my watch. Not in my library." As Karen walked Margaret to the door, the older woman paused. "How are they? The girls?" "Lily's recovering. Emily's processing. They're safe now." Margaret nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "Thank God. And thank God for Officer Reynolds, who did what the rest of us should have done weeks ago." After Margaret left, Karen sat alone in the quiet library, thinking about good people who make quiet choices, and how much those choices can cost. Sometimes the failure isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's just silence dressed up as politeness. Karen Mills set up her laptop in the library's community room and prepared for a series of interviews she'd been dreading. Over the past week, Officer Reynolds had identified 17 regular library patrons who'd been present during the weeks Emily and Lily lived between the shelves. 17 people who'd seen something. 17 people who'd said nothing. The first to arrive was Dorothy Chen, 73, a retired teacher who came to the library every Tuesday and Thursday for book club. "I saw them," Dorothy said immediately, her voice trembling. "The two red-headed girls. I saw them many times." "Can you tell me what you noticed?" Karen asked gently. Dorothy's hands twisted in her lap. The older one, Emily, she'd bring picture books to her little sister. I watched her read aloud, so patient, so gentle. I remember thinking, what a sweet big sister. "Did you notice anything concerning?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment. The little one looked tired, pale. She didn't have the energy most children that age have, and they were always in the same clothes. She paused. "I'm a grandmother, Ms. Mills. I have 4 grandchildren. I know what children should look like when they're thriving, and that little girl wasn't thriving. Why didn't you say anything?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. "Because," Dorothy said slowly, "I didn't want to judge. Maybe they were having a hard week. Maybe the mother was working 2 jobs and doing her best. Maybe I was seeing a bad day, not a bad situation." She looked up, eyes wet. "I'm Asian American. I grew up with people making assumptions about my family, about how we lived. I promised myself I'd never do that to someone else." Karen nodded, understanding the weight of that history. "But now I wonder," Dorothy continued, her voice breaking, "where's the line? When does giving people the benefit of the doubt become abandoning a child who needs help?" Next came Robert and Susan Martinez, married 62 years, library volunteers who shelved books every Wednesday morning. "We saw them sleeping," Robert said quietly, "or trying to. It was early, maybe 7:30 in the morning when we came in to volunteer. They were curled up together in the poetry section behind the big chair." Susan picked up the story. "Emily woke up when she heard us. She looked terrified, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. She grabbed her sister and they went to the bathroom. We told ourselves they must have come in early with a parent," Robert said. "Maybe their mother worked the opening shift at the cafe." But Susan shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't tell ourselves that. We hoped that. There's a difference. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I knew no parent was coming, but I didn't want to get involved. What if I was wrong? What if I caused trouble for a family who didn't deserve it? So we said nothing," Robert finished. "And we've had to live with that every day since." Then the pattern repeated through the afternoon. Gerald Thompson, 81, saw Emily taking leftover pastries from the cafe tables. "I thought maybe she was just hungry after school. Kids are always hungry." Linda Foster, 67, noticed Lily coughing for days. "I thought about mentioning it to staff, but I didn't want to be nosy." Patricia Owens, 75, saw Emily helping Lily wash her face and hands in the bathroom with paper towels. "I wondered where their mother was, but I didn't ask. It felt intrusive." By the end of the day, Karen had heard 17 versions of the same story. Good people, kind people, people who'd spent their lives contributing to their community, all of whom had seen children in distress and chosen comfort over courage. The last interview was with Helen Bradshaw, 83, who came to the library every single day to read newspapers. "I saw those girls more than anyone," Helen said, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "Every single day for 3 weeks. I watched that baby get sicker. I watched her sister trying to care for her. I watched them eating scraps and drinking from the water fountain like it was a meal. And I told myself it's not my business. Someone else will handle it. The library staff will notice. A teacher will call. A neighbor will check in." She looked directly at Karen. "I'm 83 years old. I've seen a lot in my life. Wars, recessions, family tragedies. And I've learned that the most dangerous words in the English language aren't, 'I don't care.' They're, 'Someone else will handle it.'" Helen stood slowly, gathering her purse. "I was a nurse for 45 years. I spent my whole career speaking up for patients who couldn't speak for themselves. But when it mattered most, when 2 children needed someone to speak up, I stayed silent." She paused at the door. "We're good people, Ms. Mills. Every person you interviewed today is genuinely kind. We volunteer, we donate, we vote. We care about our community. But caring isn't enough if it doesn't translate into action. And that's what I hope people learn from this, that good intentions mean nothing if we're too afraid to be inconvenient. After everyone left, Karen sat alone in the quiet room, surrounded by 17 statements from 17 good people who'd made the same quiet choice. To look, but not to see. To notice, but not to act. And somewhere in that gap between seeing and doing, 2 children nearly disappeared. Karen Mills compiled her report in the sterile conference room at Child and Family Services, surrounded by representatives from every system that should have caught Emily and Lily before they ended up sleeping on a library floor. The school district sent Principal Janet Morrison. The hospital sent their social services coordinator. The county welfare office sent a case supervisor. And one by one, Karen walked them through the cascade of failures. Emily Carter was enrolled at Oakwood Elementary, Karen began. She missed 17 consecutive school days. No one followed up. Principal Morrison shifted uncomfortably. We send automated absence notices to the parent email on file. We received no response. With budget cuts, we don't have staff to personally follow up on every absence. Even 17 days? Karen asked quietly. Silence. Claire Carter was hospitalized 4 months ago with a serious respiratory condition, Karen continued, turning to the hospital representative. She had 2 dependent children. Was any family assessment conducted? The coordinator checked her notes. Mrs. Carter was admitted through emergency. Our protocol requires social work consultation for patients with extended stays, but we were short-staffed that month. The consultation was scheduled, but it appears it never happened. Karen nodded, unsurprised. And when Michael Carter lost his job, lost his housing, when his family became homeless, did he reach out for assistance? The welfare supervisor flipped through files. We have no record of an application from Michael Carter. No food stamps request, no housing assistance inquiry, no emergency aid application. Because he didn't know how, Karen said. He was a warehouse worker, high school education, no experience navigating social services. He was raised to believe asking for help meant failure. So when his wife got sick and his world collapsed, he tried to handle it alone. She pulled out the security footage still. Emily and Lily curled together between library shelves. This is what happens when every system has a gap, when schools send emails instead of visits, when hospitals are too understaffed to follow protocol, when help requires knowing how to ask for it, when everyone assumes someone else is watching. She looked around the table. These girls didn't fall through the cracks. They fell through a canyon built by underfunding, bureaucracy, overwhelmed staff, and a culture that treats struggling families like problems to process instead of people to protect. Principal Morrison spoke first. What do we do differently? Karen closed her folder. We assume nothing. When a child misses 3 days, not 17, someone makes a home visit. When a parent is hospitalized long-term, someone checks on the children. When someone walks into a library every single day for weeks, someone asks if they're okay. We make it easier to ask for help and harder to slip away unnoticed. She stood. Because Emily and Lily were invisible. Not because no one could see them, but because our systems are designed to see paperwork, not people. The room remained quiet long after Karen left. Outside, Officer Reynolds was waiting. How bad? He asked. Every system failed, Karen said. School, hospital, welfare, community, all of it. Tom nodded slowly. So what now? Karen looked back at the building. Now we make sure it doesn't happen again, because the next Emily and Lily are out there somewhere. And next time, we need to notice before it's almost too late. Sometimes tragedy isn't caused by one villain. Sometimes it's caused by 1,000 small failures that add up to one invisible child. 6 months after Officer Reynolds found 2 small girls between library shelves, the Millbrook Community Center was packed. The hearing wasn't a trial. No criminal charges had been filed. Instead, it was something harder, a reckoning. Judge Patricia Hendricks stood at the front, her expression somber. The room held nearly 200 people, library patrons, school staff, hospital workers, neighbors, local business owners, people who'd seen Emily and Lily during those 3 weeks, people who'd looked away. We're here, Judge Hendricks began, not to assign blame to any one person, but to understand how a community, a good community, let 2 children become invisible. She gestured to the documented timeline projected on the wall. 3 weeks, 17 school days missed, hundreds of library visits, dozens of witnesses. "I'm going to ask a question," the judge said, "and I want honest answers." The room tensed. "How many of you saw Emily and Lily Carter at the library during those 3 weeks?" Slowly, hesitantly, hands rose. 1, 5, 10, 20, 40, more than half the room. Judge Hendricks nodded slowly. "Keep your hands up if you noticed something that concerned you." Nearly all the hands stayed raised. "Keep them up if you spoke to the girls, asked if they needed help, told a staff member, called someone." One by one, every hand lowered. Every single one. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dorothy Chen stood, her voice shaking. "I saw them. I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid of being intrusive." Robert Martinez rose. "We saw them sleeping in the library before it opened. We told ourselves someone else knew." Margaret Patterson, the head librarian, stood last. "They were in my building, under my watch, and I convinced myself it wasn't my place to ask." Judge Hendricks let the confession settle. "I'm not here to punish good people for human mistakes," she said quietly. "But I am here to say this. Intention doesn't equal impact. You didn't intend to harm those children, but your silence nearly cost them everything." She paused. "Emily Carter is 10 years old. For 3 weeks she kept her sick little sister alive with scraps and library water. She slept on floors. She stayed invisible because she was taught that good children don't cause trouble." The judge's voice grew firmer. "And every single adult in this room taught her that lesson. Not with words, but with your silence." Principal Morrison stood. "What should we have done differently?" Judge Hendricks didn't hesitate. "You should have asked. One simple question. Are you okay? Do you need help? That's it. Not an interrogation, not an accusation, just human concern." She looked across the packed room. "This community failed Emily and Lily. Not because you're bad people, but because you chose comfort over courage. You chose politeness over protection. You chose to assume someone else would act." The judge picked up a folder. "I've reviewed every statement, every interview, and you know what's missing? Cruelty, malice, evil intent. What I see instead is good people making small, quiet choices, and those choices added up to 2 children sleeping in a library for 21 nights. She closed the folder. "So here's what I'm asking from this community. Never again. Never again let fear of being wrong stop you from being right. Never again let politeness silence your instincts. Never again assume someone else is watching." The room remained silent, the weight of collective responsibility settling over everyone. "Because Emily and Lily survived," Judge Hendricks said softly, "but the next children might not be so lucky." She looked toward the back of the room. "And now, Emily has something she'd like to say." The room fell into absolute silence as Emily Carter walked to the front. She was 10 now, taller than she'd been 6 months ago, her red hair neatly braided. She wore a blue dress that actually fit, but her eyes still carried that too-old awareness. Karen Mills stood beside her, a gentle hand on her shoulder, but Emily had asked to do this alone. She'd practiced. She was ready. Emily stood at the microphone, looking out at 200 faces. Some she recognized from the library, the nice grandmother who always smiled, the couple who shelved books, the librarian who let them stay all day, people who'd seen her, people who'd said nothing. She took a breath, the same careful breath she'd taken 100 times when trying not to bother anyone, and began. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm 10 years old, and 6 months ago I lived in the library with my little sister for 3 weeks. Her voice was steady, clear. "A lot of people want to know who left us there, who abandoned us, and I understand why that feels like the important question." She paused. "But I think maybe there's a different question. Not who left us in the library, but who saw us there, every single day, and didn't ask if we needed help." The room seemed to stop breathing. "I remember faces," Emily continued. "The lady who sat by the window reading newspapers, the man who always got coffee at 10 o'clock, the librarian who helped me find books for Lily. I remember making myself small, staying quiet, not causing problems, because I thought if I was good enough, invisible enough, everything would be okay." Her voice wavered slightly. "But I also remember being so scared, watching Lily get sicker, not knowing what to do, hoping every single day that someone would notice. that someone would ask. Emily looked directly at Margaret Patterson. "You smiled at me every morning, Miss Margaret. You were so kind, and I wanted so badly to tell you we needed help, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd be angry. Afraid they'd separate me and Lily. Afraid I'd get my dad in trouble." She turned to Dorothy Chen. "You watched me read to Lily. You told me once I was a good big sister, and I wanted to say, I'm trying, but I don't know how much longer I can do this." Emily's hands gripped the podium. "I don't blame any of you for not knowing, but I really wish, someone had asked. 'Cause I couldn't ask myself. I was too scared, too worried about being a burden. Children shouldn't have to ask for help," she said, her voice stronger now. "They shouldn't have to be loud or obvious or falling apart before someone notices them." She looked across the room, meeting eyes that couldn't hold her gaze. "Everyone wants to know who left us in that library, but the answer is, everybody did. Not my dad. All of you. Every person who saw two little girls sitting alone day after day and decided it wasn't your business." The silence was crushing. "I learned something these past 6 months," Emily said quietly. "I learned that good people can make bad choices, that being polite can hurt someone, that sometimes asking one question, 'Are you okay?' can save a life." She stepped back from the microphone, then returned for one final thought. Lily almost died, not because someone was cruel, but because everyone was too afraid to be kind. Emily walked back to her seat, leaving 200 adults sitting in silence with the weight of a child's truth. Judge Hendricks didn't speak. She didn't need to. Emily had said everything that needed saying. Sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from the smallest voice, and sometimes shame doesn't need a gavel, just a 10-year-old girl brave enough to tell the truth. 3 months after the community hearing, Michael Carter sat in a small office at the Millbrook Family Recovery Center. He looked different than the broken man Officer Reynolds had found at the shelter. Cleaner, steadier, but still carrying the weight of what had happened. "How are the girls?" he asked Karen Mills, the same question he asked every session. "Lily's fully recovered. No lasting effects from the respiratory infection. Emily's in therapy. She's learning that keeping everyone safe wasn't her job." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "It was mine." "Yes," Karen said simply. "It was." She didn't soften the truth. That was the agreement they'd made. Honesty without condemnation. "Tell me where you are this week," Karen said. Michael took a breath. "I'm working. Warehouse job. Part-time. It's not much, but it's steady. I'm in the supervised housing program. Group therapy twice a week. Parenting classes on Saturdays." He looked down at his hands. "I'm doing everything you asked, everything the court ordered, but I still don't know if I'll ever deserve to be their father again." "Deserving isn't the question," Karen said gently. "The question is, are you becoming someone who can keep them safe?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. "When Claire got sick, I panicked. She'd always handled everything. Bills, appointments, school forms, all of it. I worked, brought home money, thought that was enough. When she went to the hospital, I realized I didn't know how anything worked. I didn't know who to call for help, didn't know how to apply for assistance. I'd spent 15 years being a provider, but I'd never learned to be a parent." His voice broke. "So when everything fell apart, I did the worst possible thing. I gave up. I told myself the library was safer than being with me, and I believed it because believing it was easier than facing how badly I'd failed." "What do you understand differently now?" Karen asked. "That asking for help isn't weakness. That my girls needed a father who tried and failed, not one who walked away. That keeping them safe meant more than keeping them fed. It meant being present, even when I didn't know what to do." Karen nodded. "The court will review your case in 2 months. Your progress will determine the next steps for custody." "I know." Michael looked up, his face determined despite the fear in his eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be the father they needed all along." "That's the right thing to ask for," Karen said. Across town at the hospital, Claire Carter sat in her room with a different social worker, having a similar conversation. "I'm being discharged next week," Claire said. Her voice was stronger, though her body still showed the toll of 6 months of illness. "Outpatient treatment, oxygen at night, but I can go home." "Where is home?" the social worker asked gently. "Temporary housing through the recovery program. It's small, but it's stable." She paused. I want to see my girls. I need to see them. You will. Supervised visits start next week. Claire closed her eyes. They shouldn't have been alone. I was supposed to protect them. You were unconscious in a hospital bed. You couldn't protect anyone. But I should have had systems in place. Backup plans. I should have taught Michael how to handle things. I should have made sure someone was watching if I couldn't. The social worker leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, you can't plan for every disaster, but you can rebuild from this one. Your girls need their mother. A healthy mother who can show them that falling apart doesn't mean staying broken. Claire nodded, wiping tears. I'll do whatever it takes. At the foster home where Emily and Lily were staying, Rachel Morrison, their temporary guardian, watched the girls play in the backyard. Lily chased butterflies with the energy of a healthy 3-year-old. Emily sat reading, but she looked up every few minutes to check on her sister. Still vigilant, still responsible. Rachel made a note to mention it in therapy. Emily, she called gently. Can you come inside for a minute? Emily came immediately, worry flickering across her face. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, I wanted to tell you something. Your mom is being released from the hospital next week, and your supervised visits start on Saturday. Emily's face transformed, hope and fear colliding. Both of them? Mom and Dad? Separate visits for now, but yes, both of them. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Are we going home? Not yet, but you're going toward home, step by step. That night, Officer Tom Reynolds wrote in his incident report, the final entry in a case that had changed his perspective on everything. The Carter case taught me that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about accountability with compassion, holding people responsible while giving them room to heal. Michael Carter made terrible choices, but he's not a monster. He's a man who broke under pressure and didn't know how to ask for help. Now he's learning. The community failed these children, but they're not villains. They're good people who've committed to being better. And Emily and Lily, they survived. Not unscathed, but alive. And that's where recovery begins. Accountability doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes it just requires the truth, a path forward, and people willing to take it. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, Emily Carter walked into the Millbrook Public Library holding her mother's hand. It was the first time she'd been back since that day Officer Reynolds found her between the shelves. The library looked the same. Same tall windows, same worn carpet, same smell of old books and coffee. But everything felt different. You okay? Claire asked gently, squeezing Emily's hand. Emily nodded. She was 11 now. Still carried that awareness in her eyes, but something had softened. Therapy was helping. Having a home was helping. Having parents who were learning to be present was helping. They were living together again, all 4 of them, in a small apartment through the family reunification program. It wasn't perfect. Her dad still struggled sometimes. Her mom still had medical appointments. But they were together. They were trying, and that was enough. Margaret Patterson looked up from the circulation desk and smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. Emily, she said, coming around the desk. It's so good to see you. For a moment, Emily tensed, remembering sleeping between these shelves, remembering being invisible. But Margaret knelt down, meeting Emily at eye level, and asked the question she'd learned to ask. How are you today? Really? Emily felt something release in her chest. I'm okay, we're okay. I'm glad, Margaret said. And then quietly, I'm sorry for not asking before. I know, Emily said. Thank you for asking now. Claire excused herself to browse the new arrivals, giving Emily space. Emily walked slowly through the aisles, past the history section where she'd been found, past the children's corner where she'd read to Lily. A little girl sat on the floor, maybe 7 years old, reading alone. She looked tired. Her clothes were a bit worn. Emily watched as Margaret approached the girl, sat down beside her, and said gently, Hi there, I'm Margaret. I've noticed you here a few times this week. How are you doing? Is there anything you need? The girl looked up, surprised. I'm okay, just waiting for my mom. That's fine, Margaret said warmly. But if you get hungry, we have snacks in the office. And if you ever need anything at all, you come find me, okay? The girl nodded, something like relief crossing her face. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Things had changed. The library had implemented new protocols, staff training on recognizing children in distress, community partnerships with social services, a no-child-alone policy that required gentle check-ins, not just observation. Dorothy Chen volunteered now, specifically watching for isolated children. The Martinez couple ran a buddy program for kids who needed a safe adult presence. Helen Bradshaw had started a community fund for families in crisis. Small changes, but important ones. Emily found her mother in the biography section. Claire looked healthier now, color in her cheeks, though she still carried an oxygen tank. "Ready?" Claire asked. "Almost." Emily walked to the circulation desk one more time. Margaret looked up. "Thank you," Emily said simply. "For what? For learning? For changing? For asking?" Margaret's eyes filled. "Thank you for being brave enough to come back, for giving us a chance to do better." As Emily and her mother left the library, Emily glanced back one last time. The little girl who'd been alone was now sitting with Dorothy, who'd brought her a muffin and was asking gentle questions. Someone was watching. Someone was asking. Someone cared enough to notice. Emily took her mother's hand and walked into the sunshine. Officer Tom Reynolds kept a photo on his desk. Two red-haired girls sitting between library shelves, taken by security footage, the image that had started everything. He looked at it every day as a reminder, not of failure, but of possibility. That seeing is a choice. That asking is an act of courage. That small gestures can save lives. The library was still a sanctuary, but now it was a sanctuary that watched, that asked, that cared. Because sometimes the difference between tragedy and rescue is just one person brave enough to say, "I see you. Are you okay? How can I help?" Sometimes the worst tragedies don't happen in dark alleys. Sometimes they happen in the brightest, safest places, right where everyone can see. But sometimes, if we're willing to look closely enough and care deeply enough, we can stop them. One question at a time, one child at a time, one small act of seeing at a time. The end.